Welcome to A Bevy of Bloods, a fan podcast to the Sydney Swans Football Club. My name's Noddy, joined as always by Stevo. And in this episode number 13, we're going to talk about the game just played against the Blues, a few general topics in the AFL, a quick VFL update, the game ahead against the Saints, and finish off with all of our tips for the rest of the round. So to all you Cygnets and Swanlings out there, fluff up your tail feathers and settle in for a potentially biased yarn about all things to do with our beloved Bloods. On Sunday, the 30th of May, in front of almost 30,000 people at the SCG, the sixth place Swans came up against the 12th place Blues in the Sir Doug Nicholls Indigenous round. And in a game where the lead changed 6 times, the Swans kept with pace with the Trumpeter Blues for the first 3 quarters to come home strong in the fourth quarter, establishing a 3-goal lead, and end up securing the win by reaching 100 points for the first time since round 3 by scoring 15, 10, 100 to Carlton's 11, 12, 78. Okay, Steve, first impressions. What did you think of that?
Okay, yeah, 100 points for the first time since round 3. I didn't realise that. That's a good score to get. And yeah, you're right. Like it was tight on the scoreboard the first half, but it was kind of a weird game. Like I felt like even in the first half when, they were dominating quite a bit and there was a couple of points and they got out to some leads, I kind of felt comfortable a lot of the time. Like I didn't feel too stressed watching the game, because it kind of felt like we were gonna have enough to get over them in the end. Even if they'd scored 120 points, we would have got 140 points and so got it. And look, they got the job done. The Swans, as you said, we were 6th going into the game. They were 12th, and that's the game we should have won. And like we did against Collingwood, it might not have been spectacular, but we got the job done, and that's a good thing for a developing team to be learning how to do, is to win when you should win. So I was happy with it. Good result.
Yeah, definitely. I was happy too for those reasons. And look, I loved everything about this game. Pre-match ceremonies, the didgeridoo after the goals, that awesome Guernsey that they've got. Oh man, I love it. We also were treated to an absolutely spectacular sunset behind the members stand. And it was a great turnout really for a Sunday twilight match in not great weather in Sydney. So yeah, it was a fun day out at the footy really. Stevo, what were your key takeaways, mate?
I guess the first thing I was looking at is this is halfway through the season. We've had 11 out of 22 games now, and we've won 7, we've lost 4. And if we think back just to last year, in the entire of last year, we only won 5 games. And okay, it was a shorter season. It was 17 games, not 22. But even if you adjust a 17 game to a 22 game season, that becomes 6.5 wins. So what that means to me now is that halfway through the season, we've already got, relatively speaking, more wins on the board than we had in the whole of last season. So I think that's a fantastic step forward for a young team, given the expectations we came into this season with, to be sitting at 7-4 at the halfway point and with a realistic hope of cracking into a finals campaign. That's what I took away from this one. Really good place to be.
Certainly exciting when you think of it like that. For me, the key performances from 3 players who all kicked 3 goals each. So Heeney, Franklin, and Papley really, really just had fantastic games, and we'll talk about them later. McKay kicked 3 goals, 5 behinds. Of those 5 behinds, 3 were gettable. So had he kicked those, had he been straighter, and you can't put too much pressure on him because he's obviously having a stellar season winning the Coleman at the moment, but the game would have been a lot closer and a bit more stressful, I think. But my other point is, although he wasn't, it just isn't as individually dominant, Cal Sinclair did a pretty good job and basically had an even keel in the clearance and hit out stats. Yeah, I think he lost the hit outs by about 14, but really made up that in the the center clearances and stoppages around the ground. So they were my key takeaways. In terms of the quarter by quarter breakdown, we'll just have a quick look at that. The Swannies scored 5-3 to Carlton's 4-3 in the first quarter. In the second quarter, the Carlton Blues got the win there, 4-2 to our 3-1. In the third quarter, the Swannies won 3-2 to Carlton's 2-4. And then in the fourth quarter, the Swans won again, 4-4 to Carlton's 1-3. So you can see there in the second half that their accuracy really dropped off. All right, stats. Stevo, throw me some numbers.
Oh, the first one I've got is a number that I was very excited about when I saw it at the end of the game, was tackles. 82 tackles to 53. I mean, that's massive difference. That's plus 29 if I can count right in tackles. And what tackles show, it's not just the act of tackling. Tackles are intent and a desire to put pressure and to work hard for your teammates to win the ball back and make sure that when they get the footy, they're not just zipping it out of there and taking it forward. So yeah, the first one for me was the tackle stat, massive tick on the tackles for the Swans this week. And then on the other side, uncontested possessions. We've talked a lot in the past couple of months on this podcast about the importance of uncontested ball and being able to win it on the outside and how that can really show a gap between your opponents. And you actually broke down this for me into halves, which was really interesting to look at. In the first half, uncontested ball was dead even. I mean, we're up by 89 to 88, so nothing in it at all. In the second half, when we really started to turn the screws on them and to start to play much better footy, 126 to 70, so plus 56 in uncontested ball. If you do that over the course of a game, it's over 100 difference, and that's massive. And it showed in the way that we played and the way that we were able to take the ball forward and score. So, those two, the tackles and uncontested ball, both really good from the Swans this week.
Yeah, I'm going to look at inside 50s. You spoke about inside 50s against the Dockers last week and how we just didn't have enough. And I think we responded quite well. We had 58 to Carlton's 44. So we got 13 more than we did last week. And Carlton actually had 25 fewer than Fremantle did. So it was a complete turnaround. So we really improved in that area. That said, in terms of those inside 50s becoming goals, it was about even. So we were 25.9%. Of our inside 50s became goals, and Carlton's 25% of those, their 44 inside 50s became goals. So it was basically the same. The difference really, as alluded to earlier, was that we were just more accurate. We converted at 60% compared to their 48%. So that's what I looked at this week. In terms of your favourite moments of the game, Stevo, what were they?
I got a couple this week. I got one on the field and then one off the field, happened in the stands. I'll start with the one on the field. This is in the first quarter, about 5 or so minutes to go in the first quarter on the countdown clock. And Callum Mills has got the ball about 60 or so out. And Buddy Franklin is leading out on one of his sort of leads that he comes to, expect to mark the ball around about the 50 or so. And then Mills ignores Buddy, and instead he kicks the ball to Kennedy, who's come through on a lead, into the space that's come behind where Buddy Franklin was. And then Kennedy takes the mark and goes back and kicks the goal from a set shot. And the thing I really like about this is it shows a maturity in the Swans midfield and the way that their players are thinking about delivering the ball. It's not just take the Franklin option, it's take the best option. And Franklin 50 metres out on the boundary is still not a bad option. Like, we know he dobs these all the time, but Josh Kennedy 35 metres out on a better angle is a better option. And so for Mills to have the composure to look past one of the greatest goal kickers of all time and put it to a bloke who's coming into a better position, I thought was a really, really good thing for the team. And it shows also this unselfish role that Franklin is willing to play in the side. 1 week he kicks 6 goals, the next week he's happy to lead out so someone can lead in. Whether he did it on purpose, we don't know. Maybe he was expecting to get the kick the whole time. But and he was fuming at Mills afterwards for not giving it to him. But at least on the telly it looked good. So that was the one on the field. And then the other one, and this has got quite a lot of attention in the media and social media in the last couple of days. Actually, there was a point in the third quarter. Isaac Heeney kicks his third goal and he boots it up into the stands, and then the camera zooms in on this little girl in the crowd in her Swans gear with her family, and she's got the football and she's holding on to the football. Doesn't look like she particularly wants to give it back, and her mum's taking a photo. Eventually, your dad gets the ball and chucks it back to the game, and then the Swans went on a bit of a social media campaign during the week to try and find a little girl. And they did manage to find her. Her name's Etta Mason. She's a 7-year-old Swans fan, and they found her and they managed to organise through the parents to get her off school for the morning. She went out to the Swans training. She met Buddy, she met Isaac Heeney, who kicked the ball up there. She met a bunch of the Swans players, which was fantastic. You can see the videos on the Swans social media. They're all over the place. And another fun little point on that one, actually, the person who caught the ball when it was kicked into the crowd was actually Lynn McGranger, Irene from Home and Away, for those who are familiar, who's been a long-term Swans fan. I think she was even the number 1 ticket holder at the Swans for a period.
Yeah.
And so she was actually the one who caught the ball and gave it to the little girl in the first place, which I thought was really cool. So little 7-year-old Etta got to go along to Swans training and meet all of her favorite players, and this I found really interesting. I was thinking about it, and she's 7 years old. Buddy Franklin is coming into his 35th year, I guess. He's already turned 34. When Buddy Franklin started playing his first senior game of AFL footy, 24 of the current Swans players were 7 or younger. More than half the
could,
list.
it could have been those guys in the crowd like Etta catching
Absolutely,
the ball.
yeah. So he would have been
it.
like a young guy in his first year at training when the young girl comes along with the footy, and in all of that time since then, 24 blokes on the Swans list were 7 or under, which I thought was interesting thinking about how the age profile of the team that we've got, which is really cool. Yeah, so those were my moments from the weekend. Yeah.
Yeah, that was awesome. I really love that as well. For me, just short and sharp this week. Second quarter, Buddy's beautiful body work to hit Wiedering into Jones and bowl them both over. 2 blues, 1 stone, and then kicked his second. I thought that was just like classic Buddy. A couple of other things. My bro and the little kids in front of us screaming, "Chewy on your boot," every time McKay would take a shot, and then him ended up kicking 5 behind. So I definitely pay that to them this week. And lastly, Harry Cunningham almost getting guillotined by the banner, and we'll make sure to put a photo up on our Facebook and Insta pages, but then him going out and probably having the best game he's ever played. So I just thought that was a great turnaround. It's an awkward photo, and it's unfortunate timing because it's like Buddy streaming through, and then behind him is Cunningham sort of getting his head chopped off by this banner that's not breaking properly. But I obviously didn't love that, but I particularly love the way Cunningham played this round. All right, Stevo, let's get on to the ABOB medal. So let's hear your 5 best Swans players on the ground using 5-4-3-2-1 scoring system, 5 points being the best. Kick us off, mate.
5 for best. Number 5, I had Isaac Heeney, best on ground. And then in 4 votes, Josh Kennedy, 3 for Harry Cunningham, 2 for Tom Papley, and 1 for Jake Lloyd this week.
Nice one. I had 5 for Heeney, 4 for Cunningham, 3 for Kennedy, 2 for Lloyd, and 1 for Papley. So, mate, we are exactly the same players, just slightly different order here. So why don't we just have a general chat about the 5?
Yeah, that sounds right. Yeah.
Isaac Heeney, what a game. Let us know what you think about him.
What else do you want from a half forward than what he delivered? 20 odd touches, something like that, 3 goals, involved in a bunch of our scores, and he's got a presence. I mean, the thing that I really like about Isaac Heeney, and this is why I value him as one of the really top players in the AFL when he's not injured, because he's had some problems with injury, is because there's not many people that are in the AFL that have got his ability to play like a tall forward with his leap and his anticipation, his leading, but then also dominate the ball on ground level. So he's just so hard to match up on. David Teague, they were talking about it. They asked him in the post-match in the press conference after the game about Heeney, and he's like, well, yeah, I mean, who do you put on him? What are you supposed to do? The guy's like, he's got so many weapons that if you cut off one, you're going to expose the other. It's really tough because if you put a tall on him, he dominates him on the ground. You put a small on him, he just toys with him. So, yeah, best on ground by a mile for me. Yeah, definitely. And we'll just shout out to his the nickname that our group gives him, Isaac the Heat Heeney, after an interview he gave a couple of years ago where he said, boys just got to bring the heat about 100 times. So I know a couple of other Swans fans call him Isaac Hangers Heat because he can take absolute hangers and screamers. But yeah, he just had such a fantastic game and just a really balanced game for those things you pointed out there. 6 inside 50s. Like as a half forward. So wow.
He's so mobile. Like he's not limited to the forward half of the ground. Like he can drift back and help out, and he just put it all together. I think he kicked 1 behind as probably his only blemish, but that was a left foot snap. I think that behind. So you can't be too harsh on the guy because he's such a freak everywhere else. But yeah.
And he works, like he's just like, and this is the thing, because a lot of his goals, like this week and in previous weeks, he often just seems to get that kind of Johnny on the spot pop up in 5 meters of space and get a little easy one on the forward line. But he only gets that because he runs his guts out to get that separation that his opponent just can't go with him because he's blown up 10 meters away and then he's in that space. So often it might look like some of his goals are pretty easy goals, but when you're a player like that, you're getting paid very close attention. He gets those goals because he works for them.
Yeah, I mean, touch wood. Hopefully, he can stay injury-free and continue to have, as big an impact as he did against the Blues going forward. Harry Cunningham. Okay, so I'm just going to start off with him next because I thought he had a sensational game, and I know I've been a little bit down on him in the past couple of weeks, saying his kicking accuracy and his clangers and this and that. You're like, shut up, Noddy. Cunners is great. He played so well. He had 27 disposals, 10 marks, 4 tackles. 6 rebound 50s. I just thought, he really was a rock down there. And our backline is starting to look very good. Against the Blues, who have their deficiencies, but it's looking very set down there, wouldn't you say, Stevo?
Definitely. And maybe he's been listening. Maybe he's been having a listen to the podcast, and he's heard this bloke Nod that's been
Noddy's rocket.
Yeah. He's like, who does this bloke think he is? I'll show him exactly who's a good footballer, and he's taking it to town. So maybe who should we stir up this week to try and get a good game out of him? It didn't work with Blakey, so at least it worked with Harry. No, look, and I really like the way he is as a player, and I think he's very important to our backline, because I always think of a backline as like a back 6 or 7, and the way that they relate to each other. And I think he's a very important part of the functioning of that defensive unit, even if he's not playing like a superstar every week. And this week he played like a superstar, so even better. So 27 touches, 10 marks. He killed it, a bunch of intercepts. And Eddie Betts, he was playing on him for most of the game. Eddie Betts got a couple of goals, and that was it. Like he had a minimal impact really, besides that one really good early goal. And I think he got one other goal, but he wasn't a dominant force on the field, and Cunningham was. So well done.
And it was interesting to hear that audio picked up where he gave away the free kick to Betts. I think it was in the second quarter, and it was deemed holding, so it was a downfield penalty. But you could hear him say, "For what? The ball's 100 meters away." So I just like that he was a little bit cheeky. He doesn't really have that image. He's sort of almost squeaky clean, isn't he? But I just thought, he unleashed that game, and it was great to see.
Yeah, that's right. That was his second. That was Betts' other goal, was for that really, really soft free kick.
Yeah.
So Betts got one goal. He didn't even get two. That second. No. Come on. Yeah.
And I'll just spend a couple more seconds on that first goal. It was one of the best goals I've ever seen.
Yeah.
That one-handed grab, and just from the boundary, it was just vintage Betts. And it was just like, I think we all looked at each other and stood up and just clapped. It was so good. But anyway, probably enough about Cunners there. All right, Josh Kennedy. I picked him third. You had him at second. So why don't you tee off there, mate, with why Joey was so good?
I mean, he's a very consistent player, Kennedy. I think he gives you pretty much the same through the midfield every week, and he's always in our best, 5 to 10 players almost every week. And this week he did the extra. He hit the scoreboard, so he kicked 2 goals. And when you've got a midfield player who's that strong, consistent, who's also hitting the scoreboard, I think that becomes a very, very good game. So that's why I had him so high up, was his scoreboard impact in addition to his regular midfield contribution.
Yeah, same. The guy had 10 tackles. So add to everything you just said there and throw in 10 tackles as a player who's probably in the last few years of his career, and to kick those 2 goals. Yeah, it was just a very key performance, I thought. So Joey got in there for me. All right, we had Lloyd and Papley to finish off, mate. So why don't we kick off with Lloydie there?
I think Lloyd's become, in the last couple of weeks, he's really come into a good vein of form, and he continued it on. I mean, he's playing with really good confidence across the back line. He's distributing the ball really, really well, and he's just continuing on. Like, this is what we were getting out of him every week. A couple of years ago, last year, the year before, when he was winning his best and fairest, and he's back into that level. And it doesn't look like dropping off, which is really good for our backline. If he's on form, it's really good for us.
Yeah, you feel like things are safer when he's down there, and it's not just his foot use. He again, for probably second or third round in a row, I've really noticed his spoiling. He can come in and slot in before McCartin or Rampy, who's marking up on the tall, and come in and just spoil it as a strategic out. And I just think that kind of thing. I know he's always been able to do it, but it's really coming to the fore in the last couple of weeks. And I just think he continues to be that sort of pillar down in the back line for us. Tommy Papley. Okay, wowzers. 3 goals, all in the fourth quarter, am I right? Certainly in the second half. He had a quiet first half and then really came to light in the second. He was one of the reasons we got over the line, basically.
Absolutely. He in that second half, he really had a presence in the forward line, and he's one of these guys who doesn't even have to be touching the ball to be making stuff happen. Like the energy that he brings to a contest and the way that he positions himself that will bring other people into it, so that our forward line is functioning on a higher, like more alert, zippy level when he's up and about, I think. So his impact around the contest, especially in that second half, was what got him votes for me.
Yeah, nice. Awesome. All right, I'm going to give a quick update about our AFL fantasy team, a bevy of bloods consisting solely of current Swans plus a few ex-Swans to help us out with injury cover. In round 11, ABOB scored 1,592 points and ranked 61,622nd, which leaves us sitting 67,836th overall. It's about a 2,000 place improvement on last week. Top 5 scorers of the game. This is like 3 or 4 weeks in a row. 4 of the top 5 scores of the game were Swannies. The highest scoring blue was Cripps on 120, and might I just add, he was nicely helped by some of that terrible umpiring to gift him some goals. His 120 was the second highest of the game. The top 5 Swans were Isaac the Heat Heeney on 135, Cunningham on 115, Kennedy on 105, Lloyd on 104, and I've realised I've missed out the 5th person here. I believe it was... Take a guess, Stevo. Who was our 5th?
Because it's tough, isn't it? Because fantasy points value certain types of stats more. Like tackles are worth a lot. I'm going to say Kennedy because he had a lot. You've got him there already. Forget about that. Who else gets the ball a lot in the back? Dawson gets a lot of kicks. Is it Dawson?
No, it's Millsy, who also had a very good game, and we left out of the probably to be called the Callum Mills medal, but it's nice to share the love. So Millsy was the 5th highest scoring Swan there with 100 points. So I had him as captain, got his 200, just banked that every week. He's playing so well. The pros this week was the Heat's 135, massive score. That was the 6th highest score of all players in the AFL for that round. Dawson's 4 frees against him cost him 12 points on his eventual 87, so he would have had 99 adjusted. And some of those, I think, were a bit hard. I know the crowd was going nuts at the in the back call, and again, it was Cripps for most of them. So either he plays it well, or Dawson's got to fix his tackle technique. But that was really it for me in terms of cons. I did forget to bring McInerney in off the bench for Blakey and missed out on his 62 points. So that's a complete rookie error on my behalf. Apologies all around. Trades next week. I'm going to bring Hickey back in. Fingers crossed that his knee is okay. Had Amati starting, even though he wasn't named. So just got to remember. I certainly have to remember to bring Hickey in for Amati. All right. Just a quick VFL update here, Stevo. Do you want to run us through this, mate?
Yeah, and it's a very quick VFL update because there's no VFL at the moment. Last week, we had no VFL because of the COVID situation in Victoria. So those games were cancelled. The Swans were able to play, I heard or read somewhere, they played some sort of scratch match with some of the other AFL reserves players who happen to be in Sydney playing their COVID affected fixtures, like maybe the Richmond players and perhaps some of the Carlton guys, I'm not sure, but they got some sort of run. It was nothing official. And then this week is the same. We don't know what's going to happen. There's no VFL fixtures as such, at least this week. And we're just waiting to see how things all progress with the COVID stuff in Victoria. Hopefully soon things can get better and we can get back to some VFL footy, because it's tough for the players who are trying to stake a claim that they're not getting footy. So fingers crossed.
Yeah, that's like last year all over again, isn't it? So hope things improve, and obviously hope COVID settles down as well. All right, segment 2, AFL hot topics. Excuse me. We're going to have a quick chat about a few things going on in the AFL. Let's start off with the MRO. And Steve, I'll get through this one real quick. Mills and Wicks both got fines, one for striking, the other for misconduct. Both are clear to play. I think Buddy, the incident on Newman, had a look at, but it was deemed insufficient force, so no action was taken. So that was the extent of the MRO for the Swans there. All right, next is the mid-season draft. Okay, so that's a big topic. It's happening, I believe, tonight. We're recording early on Wednesday morning. So talk us through that, Stevo. Where are we sitting? I know we've got one pick, but what number does it sit at currently?
We're going to have pick 12 in the mid-season draft. And, I mean, for those who aren't familiar, this is something which has only come along in the last couple of years. They didn't do it last year because of the COVID season and the hubs and everything, and it was all over the place and reduced lists and payments and whatever. So they didn't do it last year. They did it the year before. And to be eligible for the mid-season draft, you have to have been either a delisted player from another club. You can't be delisted from your own club and get picked up back again. So you've got to be delisted from your own club, or you have to have been passed over in the previous year's draft. So that means you have to have nominated. It's not enough that you were eligible for the draft, as far as I understand. You have to have actually nominated and no one wanted you. And so those are the players who are eligible. The clubs who are able to take people are clubs who have a spot on their list, either because they have left it open from the beginning of the year or because someone has become injured, like Hurley, for example, at Essendon, has gone onto their long-term injury list now because he's got hip problems and he's not going to play the rest of the year. So they've got a spot because he's off the list. So the Swans have one spot. So there's 3 or 4 clubs that don't have a pick at all. I think was it West Coast, Geelong, Fremantle? I can't remember. There's a couple of other clubs who won't take anyone. Swans have space for one player, and that will be pick 12. The question is, do we use the pick? Because we're not obliged to. It's not like the national draft where you have to take 3 picks. You don't have to use the pick if you don't want. So do you reckon we'll use the pick? I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, I think we do. I think, obviously a lot's been made of Paddy McCartin coming to Sydney, and I guess short of his brain fade where he decked that Cats player and he's gotten the 5 or 6 game ban, he was tracking pretty well. I think he was showing like he's probably able to match it at AFL level, like in terms of the concussion issues. So if you break it down, here's a question for you, Stevo. What position or what line requires additional depth currently?
Yeah, we talked about this a little bit, and I mean, I don't know, because the thing with this draft is that we don't need to take someone, and anyone who we do bring onto the list, if we don't end up thinking we need them, either we have to delist them, or I guess offer them a further contract. They're the 2 options, right? And you can take someone either for a 6-month contract now, or then I think you can also take someone for 18 months. Like you can negotiate the contract forward. So if we take a person on a 6-month contract, I don't see anyone breaking into our best 22, given the depth that we have at the moment. So you have to think about what type of player we would even bring in. It's going to be someone we want a bit more long-term, like expect to be playing into next year and become part of the squad. So it's not going to be a short fix player like a lot of teams will want, especially the weaker teams will probably want a short fix, like a short-term fix. And that's why someone like McCartin makes sense to me, because he fits that. Like he's someone who we probably don't expect to play this year, but we'd like to keep him in the system and recognize that that he's someone we want to put some faith into. And then, why not give him an 18-month contract and give him the security to then, really have a crack at making it in footy again, now that it's clear that his health isn't going to be a barrier to him playing. And then, I guess it comes back to the forward line. I mean, we're going to lose Franklin soon enough. He's not going to play forever. We'd love him to. He probably could. He probably would. But he's not. He won't. We know for a fact that he will not. So maybe like a big forward who could also play as an extra big defender if we do need to throw an extra big body back there. Someone like McCartin would suit our list, because I think midfielders we're pretty well stocked. Our defence, like you've said, we were chatting before. Also, why not give Paddy McCartin a crack at it, really? I think he'd be a good choice.
Yeah. I think that's what it's looking like, and I think the AFL, the media, they've sort of linked. No one else has been linked to Paddy, so no one else is, thinking to take him before we have a shot at him. So, but that said, that doesn't mean that he might not be in their calculation. So there's a couple of other tall forwards, I think, in the mix. There's that young Tassie bloke, Jackson Callow, who I like the look of at the end of last year. And I think, is it Jacob Edwards? He's touted to go to North. He's like a ruck forward, which is crazy because they didn't go for Logan McDonald last year. But, each to their own. But, I think you're right. Like, if you give him an 18-month contract, that gives him time to settle back into the system, get fit, and then there's that smooth transition for when Buddy goes. And then the forward line, as we've spoken about and been a bit bullish on, is that McDonald, McLean, McCartin sort of thing. So, but, we'll wait and see. Obviously, they left a spot open, you would think, for Paddy, but let's wait and see what happens. And we'll give you an update on that next week once we know tonight. Lastly, very quickly, Jack Riewoldt mark. All right. A lot of chat about this during the week, Stevo. I'm just going to come out with my opinion. It was a very good mark in the context of current marks. It should not be up there in terms of the greatest mark ever. Your thoughts? Yeah,
I'll second that. I don't think I have much else to add. It was a great mark. Don't get me wrong. Like, I don't want to take anything away from him, but it's not one that should be in greatest of all time calculations, I don't think.
was somewhat offended that it became that, and I texted you. I was like, this has gotten out of control. They're now saying it's like one of the best ever. So I mean, there's a lot of very good marks over the years, and although Jack's mark was courageous, drifting back and then got some elevation, it was quite cool to watch, especially in slow mo. But yeah, look, there's way better. I thought Shea Bolton's mark was way better, and that was just a couple of rounds ago.
Yeah, I thought
from the same team.
What do you call it? Because if you think of because there's really two kinds of marks, isn't there? There's the running back with the flight courageous into who knows what's going to hit me type mark, and then there's the high flyer, which is like the get up on the shoulders and jump. And I guess the thing that a lot of people like about this, and that I like too about this recent one by Jack Riewoldt, is that it's got a little bit of both in it. Because he is coming back and then he does kind of get a bit of a rise on the bloke's chest or shoulder, however he gets up there. But to me, in the category of those courageous running back with the flight ones, I much prefer the famous Jonathan Brown one, and I much prefer the famous Nick Riewoldt one, which was at the SCG actually against the Swans back in 2003 or 4 or 5 or something. And the Jono Brown one was around the same time. I liked those because they happened at speed, and there was a real sort of feeling of risk about them somehow. I don't know if that's the best way to describe it.
Definite risk, because they could have absolutely smashed themselves because they only had eyes on the footy and running back into like 2 or 3 players. It could have been a bloodbath.
Stupid, really, weren't they? They were dumb to do that. And actually, honestly, these days you probably wouldn't coach players to go for those marks anymore because of the risk to their bodies and their heads and their necks and stuff. You probably actually tell them, you know what, back out of that. No one's going to think any worse of you if you don't go for that, because it's incredibly dangerous. But this was 20 years ago almost, and the mentality around footy was different then, and now there's much more focus. Like when we coach blokes, like in Finland, I'm coaching footy here, as those who listen know, and we coach blokes to be courageous, go hard at the ball, but if it's reckless and potentially dangerous to yourself or someone else, then no one's going to think any less of you if you back out of it. And those marks could have gone badly. The first Riewoldt one and the Jono Brown one, they could have ended very badly. So just glad they didn't. Yeah,
well, mate, I didn't take many marks in my two game career. So, and the second game is an AFL 9s game. So, and I did my hammy in the first 5 minutes. So I can't really. I had a 1 game career, and look, I had a few touches, but certainly no drifting back with the flight of the ball for a courageous mark. But look, have you got anything to add in this section before we move on, Stevo?
This is one thing that we should bring up, just because it's having such an impact on footy at the moment. And listeners abroad might not be as aware, and we do have quite a few listeners outside of Australia, might not be as acutely aware, at least, of the situation in Victoria with the COVID lockdown. There's been an increase in COVID cases in Victoria. So the Victorian government has put the entire state of Victoria really onto a lockdown until they can get the situation under control again. So that's had a massive effect on the AFL and where games are played and how teams can move around the country, because the flow-on effect from the Victoria lockdown is state borders are being closed. And at the moment, the New South Wales border remains open as far as if I'm up to date, and that means that they can play a lot of games in Sydney at the moment. So I think half the games this week, which we'll talk about later on, are in Sydney. So if you're wondering why half the games are at the SCG this week, it's because of that, and we don't really know when it's going to finish. The Victoria lockdown may end on Thursday. It may be extended. We don't know, and we just have to play it by ear and keep you updated as we go forward.
Yeah, last year, obviously, Queensland helped the AFL out by pretty much opening its doors for business and had those hubs up there and played the grand final there. Obviously, all things going well in New South Wales, Sydney can obviously do the same. So who knows? There might be 2 non-Victorian grand finals in a row. That would certainly shake the establishment. But no, look,
be wonderful. I mean, all things considered, obviously we want the health situation to resolve itself, but it wouldn't be the worst thing in the world if we played the second grand final in a row outside of Melbourne. Maybe the world could learn that it's not the end of the world.
Yeah, it'd be a second credible example of that life goes on if the grand final isn't at the MCG.
Life did go on, didn't it? After the grand final last year, the sun came up the next day, didn't it? October 24th or whenever it was. Yeah.
It depends which Victorian you ask, but
not if you're a Geelong fan, maybe not.
Yeah, exactly. Just lastly, Stevo, just a quick Buddy goal update. So at the end of round 10, he was 963. kicking 3 against the Blues. He's now 966. So he is 5 goals away to overtake Jack Titus's 970 and needs 34 more for the magical 1,000. So still on track, and hopefully he can stay in, health for that. All right, let's move on to the round ahead preview. In this last segment, we're going to focus on 3 games. Most importantly, the Swannies' next game. Then 2 other games of interest, one introduced by Stevo and the other by me. After that, we'll finish off with our tips for the rest of the round. So game 2 of round 12 is a now home game for the 6th place Bloods, taking place this Saturday, the 5th of June at the SCG in Sydney due to COVID rescheduling, against the 12th place St Kilda Saints, with first bounce at 1:45 p.m. local Sydney time. All right, Stevo, against the Blues, did we suffer any injuries? How are we looking?
Nothing new from that game. Looking pretty good, actually. The injury front in general is looking pretty good for the Swans at the moment. So there'll be no forced outs, at least, for injuries.
That's great. I know that Buddy had a bit of a knock in the opening moments of the 4th quarter, but played on. So I think hopefully he'll be okay. All right. So if we have got players like Hickey and Fox fit and expected to return, who makes way?
Yeah, and those would be the 2, wouldn't it? I mean, you think of the ones who are coming back from injury, they're the ones who are both fit to come back in and you would think would come back into the side. I mean, I think Hickey in for Sinclair is obvious. I don't think anyone would disagree on that. Hickey is one of the form ruckmen of the comp for the whole season so far. And then I'd say Fox in for Brand. I think he was all right, Brand. Like, he didn't do anything wrong, but I'd prefer Fox in to Brand.
Yeah, I mean, Brand did well. I think it's his 2nd game of the year. I think he played in the Suns game, if I'm remembering correctly. And like, he's a tall unit. He's our tallest back. He's 198 centimeters. But he almost doesn't really play very tall, does he? I know he can mark up, but he sort of drifts and he sort of plays very similarly to McCartin and Rampy. And obviously those guys have been able to get it done. So I thought we brought him in for a bit of extra height to help deal with McKay. But look, I think he'd probably feel a bit stiff getting dropped because he did absolutely nothing wrong and played quite a good game. But yeah, Fox is similarly had a great preseason. Has just been set back with the finger and that freak eye. So we'll leave it in the hands of the Swans gods. But on behalf of the Swans fans out there on Facebook and social media, Dylan Stephens, Hayden McLean, obviously didn't have their best games. I'd keep them both in. How do you see it, mate?
Absolutely. I think Stephens, I'd just like to see him get and we said this before as well, just a run of, 3 or 4 games, just to get a bit of confidence of what it's like playing footy at AFL level, the extra pace of the game, get a bit of confidence, get his hands on the footy. The other trouble at the moment is there's no VFL footy. There's just these scratch matches. So if you dropped a player like Stephens now, it would probably be to send him back to get a bit of the footy and, get his 35 touches, get his confidence, then come back after he's worked on some stuff. But there's not really a chance to do that right now. So why not work on it in the ones? Because there's no really anyone. Like, if you dropped him, who would you bring in? I don't know. I don't know who I'd bring him in.
Blakey. I wouldn't bring Blakey back in.
Yeah, not yet.
Lewis Taylor was the medical sub. So, look, he'd been playing probably as well consistently as Dylan Stephens. I mean, we have to remember, Dylan Stephens had a 37 touch game to bring him back into the seniors. So he was in VFL form. That's why he made his way back into the team. It's just he needs a run at it. He just needs a run at it. He needs to know that even though he's a bit lighter than players, he's not going to get crushed. I just think we need to keep him in there, just keep him working, getting confidence, and should be fine. Hayden McLean, for the reasons you said, no VFL. I don't know if you bring Amadi or McDonald in at this point, but McLean had an okay game. He took that one contested mark at the end and then kicked it behind, hit the post. But otherwise, I thought he played a good role. So I don't know, Amadi or McDonald in for McLean, Stevo?
I'd keep McLean in there as well, actually. I mean, I'm reluctant to drop players generally unless, and especially if they're younger ones and they're trying to develop and learn the game, unless there's a reason to drop them. And we don't know exactly what the coaches want out of these guys each week and what sort of things they're asking them to do and what they need to work on. But like from a perspective watching on the telly, I would keep McLean in there unless he either dropped off considerably or they had one of these other blokes you mentioned, McDonald or Amadi, really, really busting the door down to get in there.
Awesome. Well, as always, looking forward to team announcements on Thursday night. So looking forward to that. In terms of St Kilda, according to the AFL website, looks like Saints reported no injuries after their win against the Roos last week, but they're not expecting their missing guns back either in Carlisle, Gresham, Hennebury, Jones and Marshall. And let's face it, they're all big outs. So we won't take anything away from the Saints there. In terms of performance predictions, okay, so which Swanee do we see flying high and why, Stevo?
All right, I had Papley last week. I went for Papley, and I said I wanted 3 goals, and I'm just going to stick on Papley. I think when you're on a winner, you keep backing them, and I'm going to go for Papley to kick another 3. He's my one for this week. I'm just going to keep going until he stops kicking goals, and I'll pick someone else.
Well, you were buddy the week before that.
And
He came through for you. So I picked Wicks last week. I wanted him to bounce back and kick a couple of goals. He kicked 1 goal, 2 behind. So he was active. He wasn't far off. But he was certainly much livelier than round 10. This week, I want to see Rowie and Warner kick a couple each because they've been thereabouts. So Warner's had a few quiet, relatively speaking, quiet weeks. But Rowie's getting the job done. I think he's our highest tackler. He had like 10 or 11 against the Blues as well. But the one thing that's missing from them in the past couple of weeks is drifting forward and kicking a goal. So I'd be happy with 1 each. I'd be over the moon with 2 each. But yeah, and Warner again probably could have kicked a goal from 50 last week, but he was looking for the selfless option. So that's my prediction there. All right, in terms of St Kilda, which players do we need to be wary of?
The one I've got is Tim Membrey. He's one that, he's in a team that's got some bigger names around him. Tim Membrey, those who might not remember, played for the Swans briefly at the beginning of his career and then was sort of struggling to establish himself at Sydney. And he's gone to St Kilda. He's really made a go of it. He's a very, very strong forward. He's not amazingly tall. He's less than 190, I think, or around about 190. He's not a big forward, but he plays like one and he has the presence of one. He's a really hard worker. He scores goals. He's a good kick for goal, and he has a really good impact with and without the ball. And he's willing to really work up the field to help out too when he needs to. So Tim Membrey is one, I think, and it'll be interesting to see who they play on him. Whether Rampy goes with him, given his size. I'm not sure how McCartin would go against Membrey. We'll see who they go with.
They could even go with Hewitt because I think he's 188 centimeters if I'm right, and Hewitt's 187. So
at least when he's working up the field, like when Membrey works up the field, someone like that, and then maybe swap over to someone else as he gets closer to the goal square or something like that, and sort of have multiple guys work off him. But he's a good player.
Because obviously, there's Max King as well, obviously, who I think you're alluding to, the bigger name, and he's taller, but he doesn't have that presence that Harry McKay has. So obviously one to look out for. But for me, it's Jack Steele. He's the Saints' best and fairest winner last year. He's an absolute jet, and he's the kind of guy that can carry the Saints on the back of his own performance. So I think we'll probably have Millsy line up against him, I'm guessing, to start with, and then run Rowie and Warner on through him. And if he's running away from us, obviously put a bit of individual pressure on him there. So those players are the ones we need to look out for. All right, in terms of what we need to do to win, what do we need to do to get a victory here, Stevo?
I think just not let them get a sniff. They're a side that's struggled this year, and they're a side that's coming with a lot of expectation. And they're not a bad bunch. They've got some very, very good players, and they're not terrible. Last year they made finals, and they won a final even last year, if I remember right. And we can't let them get a couple of goals and then get a bit of confidence and think, we're on for one here, and really put it to us. So really pressure them out of it. And they can look good when they get the ball on the outside. We don't want to let them get it out there. We want them to be chasing us from the start. So really, working the tackle game, getting that uncontested ball, the uncontested marks, what we've been doing really well when we play well. And if we can do that again, I think that we should be able to beat them. But there's no easy games in the AFL this year. And we've found that out the hard way. And we don't want this to be one that we drop.
Yeah, absolutely. It's first versus fifth in tackles. So the Swans are coming first in the league for tackles, and the Saints fifth. So it should be a high pressure game. So we need to keep up that level of tackle pressure, maintain that similar amount of inside 50s, as well as that conversion, limit the influences of those tools like Membrey and Max King, so that they can't get it to those dangerous smalls that they have around them in Higgins, Butler and Billings, etc. I think Lonnie was dropped, so he may be back in, I'm not sure. But they certainly have the personnel there to get the job done. and they are under a bit of pressure themselves with their own performances. But yeah, I think if we can do that, we should hopefully come away with a win. But let's have a look at the win-loss and the last 5 and the previous 5. So the Swannies are running 7-4, as we've alluded to. The Saints are 5-6. The Swans have, in the last 5, win, loss, win, loss, win. And the Saints have win, win, loss, loss, win. In our previous 5 encounters, St Kilda beat us last year in that COVID year by 53 points. It was a bit of a hammering, but prior to that, for the prior 4 games, the Swans have beaten the Saints, and that's at the SCG, at Marvel, at the SCG, and at Marvel, and it by quite a number. So 45 points winning margin, 71-point winning margin, 42-point winning margin, 50-point winning margin. Obviously, the Saints in the past couple of years have restructured their list and brought in those ready-made players in the vein of Ryder, Hill, Crouch, Al Hennebury, who else? Al Zach Jones. So like they do have that. I think they thought they would be having a crack a bit more regularly than they have this year, but they're still a danger team for sure, I think, regardless of them sitting where they are on the ladder. With all this in mind, Stevo, I will just say the Saints in recent game, they've had 4 games of 50-plus point defeats this year. So the Bombers beat them by 75, the Tigers beat them by 86, Port beat them by 54, and the Dogs smashed them by 111. So when they start to lose, they really can lose. I'm not suggesting that we will be able to do that, but they're a team that, when they don't get their things right, they can implode. And I think that's why they've been under scrutiny from, the media and their own fans to an extent. But with all that in mind, Stevo, who are you tipping?
Yeah, that's interesting. The way I hadn't looked back at the past results. So I mean, history tells us if we stick to history, it's not going to be close. No matter what happens, it won't be close, because the closest margin in the last 5 games has been 42 points. Well, I reckon the Swans are going to win, and I think that I'm actually going to be confident this week, and I reckon that we're going to win by 4 or 5 goals or even a bit more. I reckon we're going to have a decent win.
Well, I mean, I'm picking the Swans, but with less confidence, as always. But I'm hoping that we can string 2 wins together. And as you're saying, if we can pick up the Saints this week and then the Hawks next week, and we'll be perfectly primed for the second half of the year. So, all right, Stevo, if a group of Swans is called a bevy, then what is a group of Saints called?
This one was unanimous. Everywhere I looked said that a group of Saints is a communion of Saints. So that's what we're going to go with, I think, because there was nothing else contradicting it.
Well, I mean, if that's what we've got, that's what we've got. So, I guess that's that religious sort of...
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I don't really know what it means, but that's what it said on the internet. So
communion. I think they'll need to draw on a higher power if they're going to improve their season and then also win, because that's the other thing. I think the D's are currently the longest flag drought, but in number 2 are the Saints.
Oh, so true.
Yeah, so there's a lot of pressure on these guys, So especially Ratton is a fantastic coach, ex-player. They've got most of the pieces in line. A few key injuries, as we mentioned before, but there's a lot of expectation on these guys, and it's going to be a hard game, but I'm hoping the Swans get the job done. All right, next up, we're going to have a look at a couple of games of interest in this round as well. And I think chronologically, Stevo, you're before me. So do you want to take the reins here, mate?
Okay, yeah, I've got Melbourne and Brisbane this week. So Melbourne's first on the ladder, Brisbane's third. It's going to be on Friday night at Homebush. This is one of those COVID, one of the Victoria lockdown affected games that we mentioned before. So it's going to be played out at Homebush in Sydney at the Giants Stadium, where the Giants normally play, on Friday night. And look, I mean, it's a absolutely enticing matchup, isn't it? It's first versus third. I think this is probably the most exciting game of the year, because these are the 2 teams, in my opinion at least, who are the best teams. Even though Brisbane's currently third, these are my 2 picks for the grand final. So this could be a bit of a grand final preview. We'll see. And I'm really excited for this one. In terms of ins and outs for the teams, Langdon from Melbourne got concussed, so he's going to miss on the 12-day concussion protocol. Who they bring in, I'm not sure. Ben Brown, the forward that they brought in from North at the start of this year, he's been playing in the VFL. Maybe they bring him in and they rejig their structure a bit. we'll see what they do there, but we'll find out on Thursday, I guess, when the teams come in. But Brown is my guess. And then for Brisbane, Ryan Lester is looking set to come back to bolster their backline, which will be helpful for them. And there's whispers, at least, that Lachie Neale might even be ready to come back, which would certainly help them out. So in terms of form, I mean, the Lions have won their last 7 in a row. They've lost to the Swans, the Cats, and the Dogs, and that's it. And none of those are shameful losses. 2 are top 2 teams and one's 6th place, which is the Swans. And Melbourne won 9 in a row, lost to the Crows by a point, and then they beat the Dogs. So you couldn't get 2 teams with better lines of form, really. Who's going to be important for them? I think Brisbane, their midfield. I've talked a lot about Brisbane's forwards every time I preview Brisbane, but this time I want to talk about some of their midfield and their ball winners. We've got Zorko, McCluggage, Lyons, Robinson, all really, really good players. If you can throw Neale back into that mix, then they're very, very menacing looking midfield. Melbourne, I'm interested in how their non-star players are going to go. Oliver, Petrarca, May, Gawn, Lever, all of these are absolutely elite footballers, and we know this. And every week that Melbourne plays well, they're delivering and playing really well. They're always in the best. In the best last week, those 5 were like 5 of their 6 best players. So I'm interested to see how the next tier of Melbourne players go. Their sort of role players stand up when they come up against a Brisbane team who's going to be able to match their guns gun for gun. As for who wins, I think that Brisbane are tough enough and smart enough and well coached enough to find a way through the Melbourne defence. It's going to be a really interesting test for how that goes. So I'm gonna say that that Brisbane should be able to do it. And one other thing which I found interesting, Brisbane have got 4 players in their best 22 whose names are Mc. We've got McStay, McCluggage, McInerney, and McCarthy, and there's a bloke called McFadden on their reserves list as well. The Swans have got 4, but Brisbane have got 5. If we bring McCartin in the mid-season draft, we'll also have 5. So when we get to play them again, we can get some bloody McDonald's sponsorship or as if they already sponsored the footy.
Yeah, when the Swans win, you're able to get a free Big Mac the next day or the next Monday or something. I've never taken them up on that offer, but I'm pretty sure that still stands.
Do you reckon it works in Finland? I could go into McDonald's here, and we got McDonald's in Finland. There's one not far from my place. I could go and hit them up. I'll tell them I'm a Swans member. I am a Swans member. It's not even a lie.
It might be geographically limited and
might be local only.
The local McDonald's staff in your Finland store will be like, who is this dude?
Well, anyway, I hope there's a good crowd comes out to Homebush to see what will be a great game. I'm going to go for the Brisbane McLions to defeat Melbourne. What do you reckon?
I'm going to go the D's to keep it interesting. It's hard for me to pick, but I think it's going to be a great game, as you've said. All right, mate, I'm going to look at the 9th placed Essendon Bombers versus the 8th placed Richmond Tigers at Optus Stadium in Perth as part of a COVID reschedule. Saturday, the 5th of June from 5:40pm local time, 7:40pm Australian Eastern Standard Time. Essendon had no injuries after their big win against West Coast last round. It's looking like Aaron Francis is coming back in for Zerk Thatcher. Hurley, as you mentioned, has been placed on the inactive list because of his ongoing hip infection issues. So that gives him another spot there. And I hear that Sam Draper is close, who I think is a very exciting up-and-coming young ruckman. For Richmond, they obviously had that big out, I think, last week or the week before, Tom Lynch. But Rewalt got the job done against Adelaide there, so they can cover that. Sounds like Nankervis has done his PCL, so he'll be out. So I think they have Chol and Coleman Jones to cover that. Edwards, I think, is coming back in potentially as well after his ankle, I guess, a couple of weeks ago. Caddy's looking good, so he'll probably hold. Asprey is still out. So there's there's probably more transition for the Tigers team than there is the Bombers. In terms of the recent form, Bombers are loss, win, 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 and they are sitting 5 wins and 6 losses. And Richmond are win, loss, win, which is the same as us, I think. And they are sitting 6 wins and 5 losses. In terms of key players for both teams, Stringer, Tipper, Parrish, Merritt, Cox, and Hind are all having great seasons and really are the backbone. The reason why the Bombers are putting some form together. For the Tigers, it's the similar, usual suspects. I'll say Rewalt, Dusty, Bolton, Cochin, Vlaston, Hooley. In terms of a few comments for both teams, this is technically an Essendon home game. And after their win against the Eagles in Perth, which we both incorrectly tipped, maybe the Bombers should petition to the AFL to make Optus their stadium. I think we mentioned that after Buddy kicked 6 against the Dockers. But yeah, it sounds like the Bombers play there as well. So look, if Sam Draper does come back in, I'm going to say that I think it's going to be very hard for the Tigers to win. Because I think, with Nank out and second rate, well, I don't want to take anything away from Chol or CJ, but without a first rate ruck, I think, the Bombers midfield of Parrish, Merritt, McGrath as well, if he drifts through there, are just going to be too hard for the Tigers to hold on to. As I mentioned, Riewoldt took that mark and played a very good individual game against the Crows last week. But he's going to need a lot more players from the players around him to be able to withstand that red-hot Bombers. A few stats. We're looking at the 5th place versus 14th place for disposals. I'm talking Essendon and Richmond when I shout out these disposals. Disposal efficiency 4th versus 13th. Tackles 3rd versus 6th. Marks 9th, 15th. And goals 2nd versus 10th. That's very interesting. I think that's quite telling. The Bombers are 2nd in the league currently for average goals scored per game. So it shows you that their forward line is actually clicking. And so the Tigers' defense will have a big task ahead of them. With all that in mind, I'm picking the Bombers, mate. How about you?
I'm going to go the way. I'm going to say Richmond. I think that I'm not ready to write Richmond off yet, is all. A few more weeks, but not yet.
Yeah, fair enough, mate. All right, let's run through the rest of the tips of the round. So obviously game 1 is Demons and Lions, and I'm going D's, you're going Lions. Game 2 is Saints and Swans, and we're both going Swannies. Game 3 is 15th place Crows versus 16th place Pies, and currently scheduled for Adelaide Oval, but that's a sort of watch this space. That's on Saturday twilight. I'm going Crows.
Yeah, me too. I think wherever it's played, I don't care if they move it to the moon. Crows are going to win.
Fair play. That's very confident. Game 4 is the Bombers and the Tigers. I'm going Bombers. You're going Tigers. Game 5 is 13th place Blues versus 7th place Eagles at the SCG on Sunday twilight. I'm going to go Blues. They'll fix up their performance against us at the SCG this week.
At the SCG, okay. So the Blues have already had a cider on the SCG. I'm still going to go the Eagles. I'm going to give them one more chance to prove that they belong in the top 8, and this is this weekend.
Yeah, they'll need to bounce back surely against that loss at home against the Bombers. So it's going to be a tough one, but I think the Blues really need to step up as well after that loss against us. Game 6, 11th place Dockers versus 2nd place Bulldogs at Optus in Perth on Sunday night. I'm going the Bulldogs.
Yeah, me too. I don't think they'll be that ordinary 2 weeks in a row like they were last week against Melbourne. Yeah, Bulldogs to win.
Yeah. In terms of the teams that have a bye, so we're entering the first of 3 bye rounds. The teams off are the Kangaroos, the Suns, the Giants, Port Power, Cats and Hawks. All right. So, Stevo, if you've got nothing else to add, do you have anything else to add at this point, mate?
No, that's it for me for this week. Yep.
Nice one. All right. Well, that brings us to the end of this episode. On behalf of the Bevy, I'd like to say thank you very much for listening. We look forward to you joining us next time. Make sure to follow us on Instagram and Facebook at A Bevy of Bloods for updates and announcements. Until then, up the Bloods and calm the Swannies.